Welcome to this KOMO News Town Hall on the future of federal food assistance. For months now, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, has dominated headlines. Also known as the Food Stamp Program, SNAP first entered the conversation this summer when the passage of the Big Beautiful Bill brought changes to work requirements for recipients. The program then took center stage during the recent government shutdown when funding ran dry, pushing millions closer to food insecurity. But what does food insecurity entail, and how does the future of SNAP affect that? In this town hall, we hope to answer those questions. Through conversations with local food banks and nonprofits, we want to peel back the layers and reveal the people behind the programs. We start by turning to Food Lifeline and United Way of King County. These two organizations both work to provide food assistance from different angles. United Way focuses on people. They work to connect individuals with services and programs to help them get by. Food Lifeline is one of the state's largest food bank providers. They distribute products to more than 275 locations across Western Washington. Here is a piece of our conversation.
Let's talk a little bit first about food insecurity, because I think that's one of the things a lot of people don't really understand, that this is an issue that is one that is so prevalent that we have neighbors. If we're not dealing with it, we have neighbors dealing with it. But it's not one of those problems that we see on a daily basis, because, few people jump up with their hands raised saying that they're food insecure. Can you talk a little bit, Stephen, about how much of a problem this is here in Washington?
Yeah, so just in Western Washington, in the 17 counties we serve, we know that around 1 in 8 individuals are food insecure. That's about 12% of the population. Unfortunately, the rates of food insecurity among children are even higher at 1 in 6, so 16% of the population of the children are food insecure. So it's really, really high, the rate of food insecurity. And what that means is either you don't have access to enough nutritious food, or you're not sure if you will. So we're sitting here on a Monday and you're not sure if you're going to have food on Wednesday. But for some other kind of intervention, you may not have food. And so that really is the definition of food insecurity. Most of those that are food insecure are working, or there's somebody in the household that's working. They're somewhere in that middle income range, and they struggle and they live paycheck to paycheck. And they find themselves in the unimaginable position of, do I pay rent or do I buy food? Do I fix my car to get to work or do I buy food? And that's just the reality of so many Americans and so many individuals right now that are facing food insecurity.
And like our area food banks, this is one of the issues that United Way is dealing with. They're trying their best to help fix.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, to add on to that, I think one of the things that we're seeing is that there is just a rising proportion of our population that is working, that, has income, has a full-time job, but still isn't able to meet those basic needs. And, that proportion of the population has really increased over the past 10 years. So when we're talking about people who are experiencing food insecurity, we're not talking about people who are unable to work or choosing not to work, right? We're talking about people who are our neighbors, who are working, have, good income, and are still not able to pay their rent and purchase food and pay for their medical bills, and repair their car, etc. Just the cost of living and covering these basic needs is going up so much that, it's really everyday Washingtonians that are facing this issue.
As we talk about cost of living, that seems to be my guess, and I'm no expert, but possibly a driving factor in the fact that people can't put food on the table?
Yeah, it's definitely a big factor, right? We know that it's expensive to live in Washington. We know that the cost of housing, the cost of food, all of us have experienced just rising costs that have occurred. And so if you're happen to be in a situation where your earning is relatively stagnant, but the costs are outpacing what your increases are, you're then having to cut somewhere. And often where that ends up happening is the money you have to buy food, because it becomes this source of your budget that you may pull back on to help make sure you can pay the rent and to do all the other things that you need to do and then therefore you don't have the food you need for either yourself or your kids or your family or whatever the case might be. I also just want to say too, it's our seniors that are living on a fixed income, and as you know, their income is relatively stable and at a particular level, and then as those costs rise, they just cannot keep up with those costs, and then again, food ends up becoming one of the areas they have to pull back on.
As you deal with families or individuals who may reach out to United Way who need help in some capacity, I'm guessing it's a wide range of people, right? Different ages, backgrounds.
Yeah, definitely. You know, it's families with young children, it's single adults, it's folks with disabilities who may not be able to work, lots of seniors who are on that fixed income. So it really spans the gamut across our community, for sure.
We're talking about SNAP benefits and changes to SNAP benefits. First up, as we talk about these SNAP benefits, and we're going to be hit with headlines, and we're unfortunately, and as somebody who works in news understands how this works, people read a headline or they get some sort of blur where they saw something on Facebook, and that's the truth for them. Talk a little bit about what you can, for what you know, the recipients of SNAP benefits, the real faces of people who do use SNAP. In your experience, who are these people who receive these benefits?
Well, it's obviously, I think it's important to step back for a minute and sort of lay out SNAP at a little bit of a higher level before we dive into the people that may qualify for SNAP. So SNAP is a national hunger relief program that has been in place for more than 40 years, serving low-income individuals that qualify for the program. You have to requalify. There's a lot of work requirements already in place. There's other things you have to do to reapply to qualify for this program. And it provides, in its current iteration, it provides financial assistance to an individual or to a family to then go to their local grocery store and purchase whatever they may need for as far as that goes. I think it's important to note that on average, I believe in Washington, it's around $6 a day is what an individual that would qualify for SNAP may get on average. Some are getting far less than that. Some may get a little bit more than that. So it's a pretty minimal amount that an individual is getting, but it's a meaningful amount. I mean, what we know about SNAP is that just under half of the individuals that receive benefit of SNAP are children. It's about 45% of those that are receiving some kind of SNAP benefit have children in the household. Just over half are somebody in the household that's disabled and therefore qualify for this program. It's a significant amount that are seniors that qualify for this program. And also important to note that in the state of Washington, it's over 40,000 individuals that are veterans that qualify for this program, and due to a variety of reasons may also qualify for SNAP. And so it is a wide range of individuals that may qualify. It is income based and/or these other criteria that you have to meet and continuously show that you're meeting to qualify for SNAP.
And yeah, I would also add, I think, SNAP is really intended to be a bridge for folks who are between jobs or face an unexpected financial hardship. So a lot of people who use SNAP use it for a short period of time as they are, getting their feet under them and figuring out a longer term solution for their financial stability. And then there are people who use it for longer periods of time due to permanent disability or whatever it may be. But I think there's a misconception that folks on SNAP are just kind of sitting on this program and happy to be receiving it for a long period of time, when the reality is so many people on SNAP use it as sort of a short-term bridge to get their feet under them so that they can, continue in their career.
So what happens when SNAP goes away? We've heard about the wide array of people who benefit from this program. How do they deal with the loss of those benefits during the government shutdown? Well, as the shutdown was wrapping up, KOMO's Lynn Nguyen went down to Bremerton to get the answer to that very question.
It's been hard, when your daughter's asking you, when are we going to get our benefits, Mom, because I'm hungry. that takes a toll on your mental and emotional well-being for sure.
Hundreds of families in Bremerton, like Andrea Pingator and her daughter, have been going without their SNAP benefits. Many now turning to Bremerton Food Line for the first time.
What are we going to do? What are we going to do for food? Like, where are we going to go? Where's the nearest place? Are they going to take us? Are they going to be overfilled?
Last month, Bremerton Food Line had more than 300 new families come through their doors directly affected by the government shutdown, adjusting their hours to help serve that increased need.
I'm really worried about infants not having enough baby formula. I'm worried about seniors and children not having enough food.
Though the end to the government shutdown is now in sight, food bank officials say they are grateful, but the increased need will likely last for at least a couple more months, with the food bank serving 66% more people in need this year than last year.
Their financial situation is not going to change overnight. So we're anticipating people needing us probably through the holidays, which is why we adjusted our hours as much as we did. We're just part of the puzzle, and it really will take partnership of nonprofits and community members to show up financially with product and with their time so that we can make it through these crises.
The Bremerton Food Line isn't alone in their preparations for the holiday season. Across the state, hundreds of other food banks are also seeing increased need from all types of people. I asked the organizers of 3 food banks for some clarity on their recent experiences, both who they're seeing coming in and what they're asking for.
Since I have the 3 of you here, and you 3 are experts in the work that you do, what are some untruths, myths being tossed out there about food insecurity, about the work that you guys do, that we should maybe set straight here? That way everybody has the real about what's going on.
Anyone want to start?
Well, I think that people might have stereotypes in mind of who is seeking assistance. The vast majority of people who access food at Family Works Food Bank and at a Seattle Food Committee food bank are working or on a fixed income. There simply is just not enough income to keep pace with the costs of life. And I think that we really try to do our best to remove the stigma of having people think that there's only a specific type of person who will visit a food bank. Many of us are just one emergency away from having to visit a food bank.
Yeah, because all it takes is a car breaking down or a medical emergency, right?
We also see many types of households. So you may have a family that comes to you twice a year or needs help just to get through an emergency situation. And you might see households that rely on us on a regular basis. So it can really vary on who needs help and when.
I think a myth that I've run into over the years working in food security are the cheaters. People, this is something that always comes up. Oh, well, they don't really need it, or I know that guy isn't really as hungry and he makes money. And they have this sort of weird view that people are coming to food banks who don't need the services and are stealing product or they're cheating the system in some way. And that really isn't the reality. I was at a different food bank working and we had a woman pull up in a Mercedes and she was dressed nicely. And immediately the things that you think come up in your feelings and, oh, well, she doesn't really need this. But you don't know what people are going through. That woman had fled a domestic violence situation 2 days before, and all she had was a car that was going to be repoed and the clothes on her back. And so she was coming to us for help. So I think just taking away the assumptions, really breaks through a lot of those myths.
It also helps people feel welcome when they come, if they know they're not going to be judged.
That said, I would imagine, too, that food banks, food pantries, those are also places where people are coming for nourishment, but they're probably also coming just for a shoulder or maybe someone who will hear them out. Conversations, I'm sure. It's a place where those are had, right, where people show up and need to talk about something, whatever they've been going through.
Food banks are very versatile, and we've had to be largely because there are so many parts of the safety net that are connected. So if you are someone who had your rent increase and you can't afford that, that's a food insecurity issue. If you're someone who is struggling to buy diapers and to keep your children in childcare as a result of that, that's a food insecurity issue. People make these trade-offs all the time in order to make sure that they have enough food on their tables, or if they can't, they go without. And so when you step into a food bank, it is highly likely that you are also visiting a place where they distribute diapers, where they are also working with you one-on-one to make sure you understand what public benefits and community resources are available to you that you are eligible for, that you can enroll in and stabilize your lives today. And in a lot of ways, it does help with that social connectedness. Maybe you come to a food bank and you see kind of similar people every week, or you see that same volunteer who knows exactly what type of fruit you like and can make sure that that's available for you when you walk in the door. And I think that that's a really important part of building this community safety net.
There have been some big changes to work requirements for recipients of SNAP benefits. Under the general rules, people aged 16 to 59 who receive SNAP and are able to work must register for work, take a suitable job, or participate in a state SNAP employment and training program. Also, they can't voluntarily quit or work less than 30 hours a week. But a major update went into effect on November 1st as a result of the Big Beautiful Bill. For able-bodied adults without dependents, the age range now covers adults 18 through 64. That is up from the prior 54. Parents or guardians whose youngest dependent is age 14 or older may also now be subject to work requirements. Before the change, the age cutoff was under 18. Plus, those who were once exempt, like some veterans, formerly exempt foster youth, and those experiencing homelessness may no longer automatically qualify for an exemption under these new rules. Failure to meet the new requirements or qualify for an exemption may lead to a loss of SNAP benefits after that time limit is reached.
I mean, I would imagine that when you have stricter guidelines or there are restrictions to a program, that people will fall through the cracks, that needs will not be met. Potentially, what's the impact to our community when there are going to be more barriers in place?
Well, I think there's a variety of things. I think, as you just said, and as Eloise pointed out, I think just the barriers that are being put in place adds, they're just going to add an extra step that people are maybe going to miss a deadline or maybe miss a step when you're struggling every day for the reality of living in poverty. And then we add these deadlines and reporting requirements that are just incredibly challenging and complicated. I think that I think what's important for us is that I think it's estimated that around, just with those changes that Eloise pointed out, there will be about 130,000 individuals that won't qualify for SNAP anymore in the state. And so they're going to turn to the charitable food system, more than likely, for assistance. And that's a huge amount of additional people on top of who are already being served by the charitable food system. And what we know about SNAP is for every one meal that we can provide in the charitable food system, SNAP provides 9. So it's a huge gap that has to be made up, but locally, which we're game to do. And we certainly will do the very best we can because we care about vibrant, healthy communities, and will stand tall and do every single thing we can do and invite as many people into our work as we can. Yet, unfortunately, that's just to sort of stay status quo. We're not even making up ground by doing all that, because by adding all these additional people that otherwise were already receiving this benefit through SNAP, we have to do all this work just to get back to where we were. And then we still have work to do to make up from there. So it's a really unfortunate, puts us in a deficit in the charitable food system.
Yeah, it definitely adds a strain to food banks and food pantries. There's also a concern that, folks will fall through the cracks, or folks won't even bother to apply because they see how much paperwork is required to be a recipient in this program and just decide that they don't even want to bother, which is of a detriment to that family, right, who needs the support. I think there's also an economic aspect of this that doesn't get talked about a lot. So there's data that shows that every dollar in SNAP benefits that comes into Washington state, it generates between $1.50 and $1.70 in local economic activity. So SNAP is good for our local economy. And without, these families receiving those benefits and putting that money back into our economy and our food system and supporting local grocery stores and jobs that way, it's a loss to our community as well.
Yeah, I just want to underscore that. So I think it's estimated that somewhere around 10 to 15% of retail revenue is from SNAP. And so it is a meaningful amount of revenue in the retail environment that SNAP is able to provide, in particular in areas that are struggling to keep their grocery store. In rural parts of America, in certain neighborhoods, it's really difficult already to keep grocery stores. And then if we're losing this revenue source that they have to stay open, you start to look at the complicating factors that may come for those communities that are trying to keep their grocery stores open and thriving in those areas.
That said, changes from the big, beautiful bill, and you're going to have to deal with them and face them. How will that impact the work that you do in making sure that needs are met in our community?
I think the first impact, or one of many impacts that we're going to feel, is administrative burden. With everybody now, as was announced yesterday, I believe, having to re-enroll, completely re-enroll. This isn't just a recertification. They have to start from scratch to re-get their SNAP. A lot of that paperwork they can't do on their own necessarily. You might have digital literacy issues. You might have language translation issues. There's all different reasons. So those people come to food banks for help to get that stuff done. On top of that, the volunteer requirements or work requirements that are coming down, right? People look to the food banks that they're receiving benefits from to give back to. I could volunteer here. I can get my 20 hours a week if I volunteer here. Most food banks don't have the capacity to take on this volunteer load of 42 million Americans across the country who are going to be cut off, in the month of them trying to just re-enroll. So there's so much that's going to come at us.
It's important to realize that there are some cuts to SNAP that have already taken place. So many of us have been dealing with this in real time and are trying to shore up the resources locally and otherwise to be able to respond next year when it's worse. We have already seen that there are a number of different folks like immigrants and asylees and other legal residents who have lost eligibility for federal public benefits starting back in July. And also the ways that food assistance benefits have been calculated have changed, and they're not going to be able to keep pace with the cost of inflation and a number of other things. So we are experiencing that in real time. And what we have had to do is to purchase more food because some of the federal resources that provided food that went on our shelves have disappeared. Figuring out how we are going to continue to pay our skilled and expert staff who may have been funded with resources that have also left our communities. And I think that going into next year, it's really been about this huge advocacy effort, making sure that people understand what is headed our way and how they can work together with food banks and frontline organizations to make sure that we have the resources we need to respond.
Is there a concern that people who either may not qualify anymore, or those people who might fall through the cracks because there's now this big administrative burden or hoop they have to jump through, that people may have to depend on our food banks and food pantries more than ever before? And this is a system that is already taxed as it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you look at some of the classifications of people that will now have a work requirement: veterans, kids that aged out of foster care, seniors who, it used to be 55, it's moving to 65. So there's these whole groups of people that suddenly will have a work requirement. Well, maybe they can't work. They might have a disability that doesn't qualify them for disability. They might have a child at home that's disabled, and that's what they were caring for, but they're an older dependent. So they're now got a work requirement. So I think those people, if they do fall through the cracks or if they've now become ineligible, of course they're going to come to the food banks. We are usually the first stop when you don't have food. I think there's going to be a lot of people and a lot more food that needs to go out the door. It's not just that we're providing for more people. We're now providing for more people and we're providing more food for all of the people.
I think that sometimes when people hear work requirements, they hear that in generally applied and they think that that's a good thing. It's important for us to realize that there are lots of people who will now have to document that they work at least 20 hours a week or so every single week, all throughout the year, that previously would not have had to demonstrate that in order to get food assistance. So that's your skilled agricultural workers who might be working seasonally. That's your gig workers. Everybody knows someone who is working one of those jobs who might have qualified for food assistance before, and now because of the change in work requirements will not, and will likely be the same folks that you see, the folks every day in your neighborhoods that you see who are visiting a food bank for the first time.
I have, which I think I share with everybody in this room and so many other people, I have a vision for healthy, thriving, vibrant communities. And we can only have that when we have people who have the food they need to live a healthy, thriving, vibrant life. The amazing thing with food insecurity is we could solve this tomorrow. We could really solve food insecurity. There's enough food. There's solutions out there that exist. I completely agree with what's been shared. I mean, it definitely starts with really good policy at the federal level, the state level, the county, and then the local level. It also, we need to have a very strong charitable food system, which we have. We're very fortunate to have that in Washington. And then we need individuals that want to lock arms with us and say, we got you. We're going to make sure you have what you need. And so that's corporate America. That's our food partners that could donate food. That's individuals that are your neighbor down the street and you that want to join us in the work that we're doing and join our partner network in the work they're doing and make sure that they're equipped to have the food and resources they need to care for their neighbor. And it's really through all those micro actions combined with the macro policy actions that we can really make sure that food insecurity is no longer an issue in Western Washington.
I want to ask you about our neighbors, because we have good neighbors, we have bad neighbors. And a lot of not so great neighbors think that this is not my problem. I'm not hungry. I don't get SNAP benefits. I don't qualify for this, so it's not my issue. Can you talk a little bit about, because I think I may be wrong on this, but I think whether or not you are receiving benefits or qualify for benefits, food insecurity impacts everyone in the community, even those who may be quote unquote food secure, right?
So as we think about food insecurity, really food insecurity is a symptom of poverty, right? That's the reality. When you're food insecure, there's a lack of income in some way that then leads to food insecurity. And so when we think about food insecurity, again, we look at our community, and that means we have more community members living in poverty, which makes it difficult to have thriving, vibrant, healthy communities. So it impacts all of us because we want all of our neighbors, we want everybody that lives on our block, in our community, to be able to live in that kind of a community that cares for the community. And honestly, we want communities that care for each other, because that's where we get investment in the community, reinvestment in the community. And so by not creating that environment, I guess, from the way you asked that question, it's feeding into a dynamic of communities that don't care for each other, that we're in it for ourselves. Well, we all have the power to change that and think about it totally different, where we're in it for each other. And how do we really work together to make this, regardless of where you live, if you're listening to this, to be a place that you want to live and you want everybody else to live, because it's just such an amazing place. And it starts with this, but it's no question that it also overlaps with affordable housing. It overlaps with access to good transportation. It overlaps with having healthcare or affordable healthcare. It overlaps with having living wage jobs. It overlaps with making sure there is not injustice and inequity in communities. So all those things together matter because they all are sort of a patchwork that can lead to or solve food insecurity.
Yeah, and I think I would add just by saying, food is such a bedrock of society, right? If people aren't able to eat, aren't able to feed themselves, they can't work, they can't, raise their families. There's so much that, you can't do if you can't eat. And so if we want people to be productive members of society and, have jobs and give back to the community, they need to be able to eat. That's really a baseline that applies to everybody. And so, even if you are not experiencing hunger, the reason that you need to care about this is because your community needs to be fed in order to give back to you. And I would also say, we talked earlier about 1 in 6 kids experiencing food insecurity. Kids cannot learn effectively in school if they're hungry. And those kids are the leaders of tomorrow. And so if we want to raise kids that will, create a future that we want to see in our community, we need to make sure that they're fed.
When we talk about this story, when this is out in the news and people just grasp at whatever they hear in passing, what do you hope they understand? Or is there an element of this that we are not talking about that really should be talked about more?
I think for me, I think we're in a phase right now where around this particular topic, around SNAP in particular, since that's been the focus of our discussion, it has become so politicized. And I wish we could humanize it into this is your grandma and grandpa, this is your mom and dad, this is your aunt and uncle, this is your siblings, your nieces, your nephews, your cousins. When we're talking about 1 in 8 individuals, we are all mathematically, statistically interacting with probably more than one person on a daily basis that's food insecure. And so it's around us all the time as we go about our day. And so I think it's important that we, there is policy and there is certainly legislation that I feel like needs to occur to make this a strong, healthy safety net program. Yet at the same time, let's put the human back into this. So there's real people that are facing food insecurity, that are getting up every morning, doing their best, going to work, trying to raise a family, trying to live independently as a senior for as long as they can. And yet they're also faced with food insecurity. And so let's think about it more from that lens and take action from that lens.
Yeah, and I would add, I think SNAP was in the headlines a lot over the past month or 6 weeks with the government shutdown and SNAP benefits being delayed and impacted. And we saw this, huge swell of community support and discussion around how important this program is. And that's fantastic. But I think it's important to remember that there are changes happening to SNAP, not related to the government shutdown at all, but related to HR 1 and the One Big Beautiful Bill that was passed in July. And those changes will be phased in over the next 2 to 3 years. So we may not see the impacts all at once. We may not hear about the impacts at all because they might be minor program tweaks that are only impacting a segment of SNAP recipients at a time. But as a whole, that sort of package of changes is going to be, it's going to drastically change the program. And so I would just encourage people to stay informed and to continue thinking about food insecurity, not just when it's in the headlines and making a big splash, but knowing that those families, those real people, are continuing to live with this issue and continuing to be impacted by legislation in quieter ways as well.
And I would say to add on to that, now is the time to continue raising your voice. If this matters to you and you want to make sure people have this critical safety net program, it's important to make sure that you let your elected officials know that's important to you, that you feel like that's a cornerstone of a thriving community, and you want to make sure that this program continues to be invested in. So there could be future legislation that changes that, and I think it's important to continue to keep that on the radar of those that are lawmakers.
That'll do it for us here on this KOMO News Town Hall. You can count on us to stay on top of the latest developments as the future of federal food assistance continues to take shape. Thanks for joining us. I'm Steve Solis. We'll see you next time.